It's easy to ask somebody who they are. But this guest, I didn't want to ask who they are. I don't want to know that. What I want to know is what does he want us to know about him? Today, I'd like to welcome you to my guest, Mr. Greg Bennick. What's going on, sir? How are you?
Hey, it's good to see you. How are you? Thanks for having me. This is exciting. And I would almost suggest that asking somebody who they are, that's a hard question to answer. Who am I? My gosh, you either want to say one word or 10,000 words. But yeah, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
I appreciate you coming onto the channel. We're going to talk about a couple different things just to let everybody know how we're going to lay this out. We're going to ask that question, what do you want us to know? We're going to talk a little bit about this, and then we're going to go into coins, but we're going to separate that series. We're going to do that one afterwards. So just everybody understands that flow. Without further ado, I've got to ask you the question, what does Greg Bennick want us to know?
It's interesting. I put about 1 second of thought into that. And what I mean is that the first thing that came to mind is the truest thing. And that's often the case, right? Human beings are insecure, frightened, terrified creatures, and we're all trying to do our best to work it out in this life. And I think that the most important thing that we can do, and what I want people to know, is that people want to matter. They want to be significant. They want to have a life of meaning, and they want to do things that are meaningful, be part of something that matters. And the reason I say that is because when we interact with other people, when we remember that, we can work to uplift others by reminding them that they matter to us or recognizing that what they do is significant. And that doesn't have to mean they climbed a mountain, they cured cancer. It could mean they're parenting well. And we remind them of that. It could mean that they made us feel a certain way. It could be that we appreciate their friendship. It could be that we appreciate their podcast and having us on their podcast. It's little things like that. But humans, as insecure, frightened, fragile creatures, need reassurance and support, and also the social connection that is a social connection that is rooted in those meaning structures. When we're part of something meaningful and part of something that we really feel like matters, it boosts us, it strengthens teams, it makes us feel like we're going to make it through this life, which is often overwhelming and distracting and intense and confusing. So we can help others get through and get by, and we don't have to solve all their problems. We just have to remind them that they matter and that the work they do is meaningful and that they and their contributions to the world and life are significant to us. I think that just about covers it. I think that's probably the most important thing I think that we can do for one another. That, and of course, work to be kind when we often are inclined otherwise due to stresses and intensities of the world. And that's true for me. It's true for everybody. But if we can remember that kindness is always a possibility and that amidst that, we create new possibilities for connection. And those connections need to be rooted in reminding people that they matter and that what they do is meaningful. And if we start with those ideas in mind, I humbly think the world would be a better place.
So I know that the last time we talked, when we were putting this together, and you just explained to me what your driving force was, and that's community. We've talked about that. So I know that you have a real place for community in what you do. But there's a dichotomy within who you are. And I absolutely love it. If you've seen the thumbnail, trial and errors, and there's something that is, if you didn't know, you just wouldn't know. Tell me a little bit about trial and between earth and sky.
Okay, so let's give some context to the audience. So you're
Okay.
saying a dichotomy, right? And the dichotomy isn't so much a separation of two things, but it's rather a somewhat tricky to see union of a few things. So I have a background in punk rock and have sung and sing in punk rock bands, and I've done this my entire life. And the image of punk oftentimes in people's mind is that it's about me and what I want, and it's selfish and anarchistic. And what I have always thought is that music brings people together, whether that's loud music or whether that's quiet classical music, whatever it might be, it brings people together. And when music and lyrics come together, it's pretty impactful for people. You really can bring people together in powerful ways. And the music that I play, therefore, is all about community. Now, interestingly, I've been through a personal journey myself in the last decade or so, having been involved in music and punk rock music basically my entire life, ever since I was a little kid. I realized that something was true. About 10 years ago or so, this is pre-pandemic by a few years, I realized that about 95% of my life, my non-work life, let's say, was in the music community. And I had music community friends, and I had friends who I could talk to about music and bands and whatnot. And a small percentage of my life was coins. Coins have always been immensely significant to me and have been since I was 10 years old and continue to be and have continued to be all this time. But my life was absorbed in music and bands, the social scene that comes with that. And I made a choice. I asked myself a question. Can I shift my entire social scene? Because what I imagined was being the oldest guy at the punk rock show, right? Would I rather be that or would I rather be the youngest guy at the coin show? I've made a definitive choice to switch my social scene. And that doesn't mean doing away with my music friends, but rather de emphasizing the role that music had in my life. And by the time COVID hit, I'm like, yeah, this is it. This is the way to go. And I'm liking this. So at this point, coins are about 95% of my life, and music is about 5% of my life. But it's an important 5%, just like coins were all along. And I've found an incredible coin community, and not found, developed an incredible coin community over the last bunch of years. It's been a pretty fascinating social experiment. How often do we change our social structure, our friend structure, just to see what that is, what it feels like? It's pretty remarkable in that way. So I'm excited that I had that kind of light go off and then decided to do that. But Trial and Between Earth and Sky, two bands, two separate bands. Trial's a band that I played in for many years, and we're still technically together, even though we play very infrequently. Like we played two shows last year. Before that, we hadn't played in 8 years. But we are and have been a band that is rooted in solid ideas, ideology, and ideas about social norms and where our role is in society, and uh, political ideas and psychological ideas. Between Earth and Sky is a separate band. We actually have a record coming out this year. And for those watching 30 years from now, this is 2026. We have a record coming out this year, and that band is far more psychologically based in its lyrics, meaning trying to explore why we do the things we do, what leads people to do the things and they do and feel the things they feel, and then the interactions which develop from that, from our inner tensions, frustrations, hopes, and desires. What happens to human interaction as a result? Because, going back to that first answer, we need each other, we need community, and we need to remind one another that we matter. And as a result, we need to really explore our psychology because we're complicated creatures. I said that at the outset. That's where the lyrics to Between Earth and Sky come in. And I'm pretty excited about it. I'm actually finishing some lyrics today for the last couple songs, recording some vocal demos, and we'll be recording that record this year.
Building a better now.
That's it. That's honestly, that's what it's all about, man. And this is a statement and a segue. I see where this is going, and I'll let listeners know. I wrote a
Nicely
book.
played. Nicely
Yeah,
played.
it's well done. I wrote a book last year called Reclaim the Moment: 7 Strategies to Build a Better Now. And I'll talk about it in a moment. But the idea of building a better now is pretty important because we're often so distracted in the world that we lose sight of who we are. We lose sight of what's meaningful to us. We lose sight of what matters most. And we get absorbed in everybody else's everything. And as a result, we lose touch with who we are. And when we lose touch with who we are, it's impossible to build community. It's impossible to build a strong team. And it's impossible then to move forward towards the things that are most meaningful to us and the people around us. So, yeah, I wrote a book called Reclaim the Moment: 7 Strategies to Build a Better Now, to explore those ideas.
And that is right here. And you have been gracious enough. We picked up a couple of these and you've signed these. So I'm going to be giving these away on my channel. But why don't you tell the viewers a little bit more about the book, what the intent behind it was, and what's your inspiration for it?
Sure, absolutely. I'll give you a little bit of the ideological background. So, in the late 1960s, there was a guy named Guy Debord. He was part of a group called the Situationist Internationale, and he wrote a book called Society of the Spectacle. And it's a confusing book. He wrote it intentionally to confuse his readers. So I don't recommend you rush out and buy it. I'll give you the quick version. He basically was saying that the world exists as spectacle around us. The images we see, and at the time he was talking about billboards and he was talking about magazines and whatnot and movies. We end up living our lives at arm's length as we watch this spectacle unfold around us. We don't have adventures because in the spectacle, the images of famous people and people doing exciting things that we see in billboards and advertisements. Other people are having adventures. We don't have to fall in love because we see images of people falling in love. And the spectacle consumes us. It consumes our time, our resources, our work. And he suggested that we need to live more fully in the midst of spectacle. I was always fascinated by that idea. And one of the reasons I'm fascinated by it is that Guy Debord is writing 60 years ago. He's talking about billboards and magazines consuming too much of our attention. What would he say about TikTok? What would he say about Instagram and Facebook,
Right.
formerly Twitter, and even my email inbox for that matter, or phone calls from my mom? all the, and I love my mom, but just all the little things throughout the day that take our attention. And I think the phone call from one's mom is a bad example because it's not quite spectacle. But you know what I mean? When you open social media and you start doom scrolling through, or you interface with media and see all of the things that are projected at you, it's a bombardment of things from people who are just trying to get your attention. That's not my mom. She actually cares. The point is that people trying to get your attention and paying good money to get your attention pulls you away from who you are and what you are. We get absorbed in the spectacle. Reclaim the Moment, 7 Strategies to Build a Better Now are 7 strategies that I came up with and wrote about to remind myself to be more present, to remind myself to build a better now so that I can build the future that I want, so that I can build the community that I want, so that I can build the teams and be a part of the team that I want. And then go after the things that are most meaningful, that make me feel like I matter, because getting absorbed in the spectacle is not going to do it. It's just going to remind me of what I don't have, what I want, what I wish I was. And that's not living. That's just this endless confusion that we all fall into. Like it's just a pool to drown in. So the 7 strategies that I wrote about, I'll just give you a couple of them. Believe in the possibility of kindness is the first one. I speak about kindness to all sorts of groups, corporate groups, associations, schools. I speak about the importance of remembering the potential of people to be kind, even when we're frustrated, even when we think that they might do us wrong. We have to remember the potential for kindness in us and in them. That's where we build possibility in our connections with one another. So that's a chapter, for example. There's one called Leap into the Dark to Embrace the Possibility of Success, because it's not often failure that keeps us afraid of trying something new. It's what happens if we succeed? If we succeed, we're going to be in an entirely new place with new parameters. The old is going to be gone. The new is going to be undefined. And what do we do then? So we often shrink back and are reluctant to try, reluctant to go for it. And that example I gave before of switching my social structure a decade ago, I think that's a perfect example of leaping into the dark, right? Because what happens if I succeed? What happens if the people I'm calling and texting all day long are texting me about coins and planchets and dies and coin things and not rifts and not mosh pits? Like, what happens then? I thought my life is going to be a lot better, and it's also going to be undefined. What happens if I succeed? What happens if my social system is entirely different than it was before? That's the type of thing that would make me, or one, reluctant to try to step into that space. So the strategy is leap into the dark. We got to go for it and see where we end up. And these are reminders to myself. I think that's the important thing that I'll say before we go on. It's just that I say throughout the book, I'm not a guru. I don't have all the answers. I'm writing this book and wrote this book as reminders to myself of ways that I can live better. And then hopefully people would connect as well along their own personal journey and organizational journey too.
Tying that in with what you talk about with community, with making sure that we come together, being a better person, understanding the status quo, living in that realm that you referenced. I want to go to the thumbnail. I want you to really quickly talk about trial and errors being the coin side of things. This is one of the things you really enjoy. Can you talk about why errors? Why is it that you chose to focus on?
Okay, so I'm going to take a quarter of a step back and give you one more strategy from the book and explain how it ties into what you just asked, and then we're going to go for it. And the tiny step back is that there's a strategy in the book: develop relationships that matter to outsmart the dread of isolation. There's a whole world happening inside of here, not because I'm smart. It's because, as I said early on, we are confused and insecure, and we're all a complicated mess at all times, a beautiful, complicated mess. I've just described all human beings. So in the midst of that, what gives us a sense of, oh, I've got some grounding is when we make connections with other people, when we realize similarities between us. So
Right.
develop relationships that matter, right? Is so important. Okay. So let's go to the graphic or rather let's consider the graphic trial and error, representing punk rock overall music and that sort of thing. And then the error side of things and collecting, and I focus quite a bit on error coins, coins that were struck incorrectly at the mint, coins that were struck off center, double struck, that sort of thing. The mistakes, I find a lot of connection with error coins on a personal level. My life is literally the collection of mistakes and what I've done about them. It's my life is entirely the result of all the mistakes that I've made and how I've shifted course back to normalcy. And I mean that quite literally. In my career as a speaker and presenter and performer, all the things that I do in life with every walk of work and every walk of my personal life is the result of missteps along the way and thinking, going back to when I was a kid and thinking, oh no, I want to do this better or do this differently. Error coins are the same way. They're the missteps. They're physical representations of the missteps along the way that are imperfect and yet still beautiful and amazing and fascinating and interesting and worthy of conversation and worthy of exploration. And when I see an error coin, I don't just see a misshapen piece of metal that is the end point of failure. I see it as representative of a mistake amidst a process. And the process at the mint is one of making billions of coins. And if the mint were to stop when it made one error coin, we wouldn't have any money. Instead, the mint learns from its mistakes, or in the case of a collector, I hope it doesn't because I want it to make more mistakes, but
Right.
learns from its mistakes and it then does better. That's what we should all be doing. We're all going to make
Right.
mistakes. We're all going to
Exactly.
hurt one another. We are harm causing creatures, and let's cause less harm and let's make less mistakes and let's live a better life and build a better now. But the mistakes are part of the process. So when I see an error coin, I see all of that represented in numismatic form.
Speaking of part of the process, we're going to go ahead and head into phase two. We're going to talk about the coins, but we're going to take a break. I'm going to go ahead and give away one of these books. Put your comments down in chat. I'm going to draw from one of those. Greg, when we come back, we're going to talk error coins.
Uh,
I appreciate your time.
Yeah, me too. And if people want to get in touch anytime on anything that I mentioned throughout this episode, gregbennick.com is the place to find me. GregBennick.com. I look forward to hearing from anybody anytime. And thanks so much for listening and watching. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure we throw those graphics up in editing. Appreciate you, Greg. Have a wonderful day. Be well, be
Thank you.
blessed. And you guys, we'll see you in the streams.